Hello everyone, my name is Robert Więtko. I'm CEO of Dashcore Group and I welcome everyone to the first this year quarterly call of Dashcore Group. Ryan, please.
Thank you very much.
Oh.
Hi everybody and welcome to our first quarter 2020 Dashcore Group conference call. I'm Ryan Taylor, I'm the CEO of Dashcore Group and I'm joined on the call by several members of the team including Robert Wykout, our Chief Operations Officer, Glenn Austin, our Chief Financial Officer, and Bob Carroll, our Chief Technology Officer. There are others on the call for the Q&A session as well. Moving straight into the agenda. As always, we'll first share a presentation and accompanying prepared remarks, followed by a question and answer session. We did collect some of the questions ahead of the call and we'll aim to address many of those on today's call as part of the Q&A. We'll also try to field as many live questions as we can from the chat within the time that we have allotted. And we'll answer any remaining questions in the queue in written form after the call as we always do in the past. Keep in mind, this call is intended as an update on the core team's overall strategy and operations. So questions should ideally reflect that intent, and more technical questions, we'll try to field those in written form after the call. Our goal for the call is to provide an update on Dashcore Group operations and development, to review the performance data on the Dash network from the first quarter, and to discuss other relevant topics for the community. As with all of our quarterly calls, we'll start with a brief overview of the Dash network and Dashcore Group's strategy. We'll also discuss the Dash network's latest performance metrics, which remained quite strong this quarter. Glenn Austin will walk us through an update on Dashcore Group's financials, including our balance sheet and income statement. Bob Carroll is going to provide an update on our technology roadmap, including information on the 2 Dash platform releases that we have put out onto EvoNet since our last quarterly call, including one this week. If you haven't seen the news on that, we earlier this week released a new version that adds a number of new functionalities to EvoNet. And we'll also discuss the remaining development efforts required for mainnet. I'll then give an update on our progress against our growth plans. And before we get into detail, I'd like to share a few thoughts on the market overall. The first quarter of 2020 saw total market capitalization of digital assets decrease about 5% from 191 billion to about 181 billion during the quarter. And that decrease was primarily caused by a decline in Bitcoin, because the altcoin market actually expanded by about 5%. And with the altcoin market rising and Bitcoin falling, Bitcoin's dominance declined from approximately 68% of the market to about 64% of the market during the quarter. And that's coming off of, multi-year highs that kind of hovered around that 68% mark. Dash's market cap increased during the quarter by approximately 63%. And that makes Dash one of the top performing digital assets in kind of the larger end of the market. And Dash's market cap ranking increased from 26th to 21st during the quarter. The Dash network continued to experience strong growth in terms of user activity. We'll get more into the numbers when we get to that section, but year-on-year growth remains very strong across a range of key metrics. In particular, we continued posting transaction count increases both year-on-year and quarter-on-quarter. I believe that's the 6th quarter in a row that we've managed to accomplish that. And excluding the estimated effects of stress tests, we hit yet another record new number of economic transactions this quarter, and a new record in terms of the number of active wallets. So in order to more objectively exclude the effects of network stress tests, we've continued to focus on the median number of transactions per day as a strong indicator of typical usage on the network. And that metric provides a snapshot that's therefore kind of largely unaffected by network stress tests. And our growth in median transaction counts increased to a new record of over 17,000 transactions per day. And that strips out coin mixing and coin-based transactions. And so that's truly user activity taking place on the network every day. As with all of our quarterly calls, we'll start off with this slide, kind of an overview of Dash. If you're familiar with Dash, this will be not new information, but we want to share it to make sure that anyone joining us gets a good overview of what we're doing. Our goal is to provide a greater degree of financial freedom for anyone by providing the world with better money that's natively digital and enables users to move money seamlessly. Dash is making payments fast, easy, secure, and inexpensive. Our brand identity continues to focus on the individual with your money, your way, really highlighting the benefits of Dash. And we're targeting individuals, businesses, and developers by addressing problems that we see in the payments industry that cryptocurrency and Dash's speed in particular can address. The network operators are another distinct group with unique needs, and we also consider them in our products and in who we serve. And we attract users with a borderless, fast, inexpensive, secure, and easy to use payment network that addresses many of the problems users face when using traditional payments. We feature instant payments for under 1 US cent with enhanced user security and privacy. These features make Dash ideal for both online and point of sale purchases. The Dash network consists of many components, including the Dash currency, which is used to facilitate payments, and the network upon which the users interact. With the upcoming release of Dash platform, we're working towards greater flexibility for developers by introducing the ability to build and easily integrate applications for use on the Dash network. We believe these are the components necessary to compete within the payments industry, deliver value to our users, and differentiate ourselves within the broader cryptocurrency space. So let's talk about how we're growing Dash. Dash Core Group's growth strategy consists not only on making great products that put users first, but also consists of credible paths with which we can grow in a variety of markets that we believe are the best fit for cryptocurrency and Dash in particular. The markets we're targeting are those with the greatest need and greatest fit for crypto and Dash, especially due to our unique features such as instantly confirmed transactions. These markets tend to be underserved by existing payment systems. The first category is hyperinflation, and here we're focused on Venezuela. Venezuela continues to be a great market for us, not only because of inflation, but because we solve a lot of the practical limitations of the local payment systems. Understandably, over 80% of adults in Venezuela have developed a deep skepticism of government-issued currency. And although dollarization is happening, it may actually be helping Dash differentiate itself. There's a lack of small bills in circulation. There definitely isn't any smaller change. And so Dash stands out as a solution that has less friction than a lot of those other options in the market, including dollars. Users wishing to purchase for dollars, for example, are able to do so, but they often need to buy a full, say, $20 worth of goods, even if they only wish to buy 10. And merchants really love the simplicity of accepting Dash transactions. They don't have to worry about having the correct change or irritating customers with the inability to make change. And so we'll talk a little bit more about how our strategy in Venezuela is changing in a later slide. There are a number of changes that we're making to adapt to the changing market there and our position within it. Remittances are primarily focused on Latin America, given the size of the remittance market there and the synergies with our Venezuela growth. This is a category that cryptocurrency has naturally taken on, given its borderless nature. And So we're taking advantage of the good fit with that use case. We have made further progress with our remittance strategy in the last quarter. We'll give details on that a bit later. The third category is crypto trading. And here Dash has been improving the movement of value between exchanges using instant send and chain locks, technologies that make Dash deposits incredibly fast and movement of value between exchanges very fast. Dash is, as a result, consistently in the top 10 for market volume in any of the exchanges in which we're integrated. And exchanges that support instant send tend to witness Dash move up those rankings. This data is beginning to encourage exchanges to integrate instant send, and they are recognizing the value doing so. We integrated a couple more major exchanges to instant send in the most recent quarter. And there's really a strong network effect that occurs as we add more and more exchanges. High chargeback industries, this is a category where our initial focus has been on esports betting, sports betting, and fantasy sports betting, and the cannabis markets. Both of those remain of interest, and we continue to pursue integrations more opportunistically in those categories. As we build products to address these markets, we are cognizant of the fact, or as we focus most of our efforts on functional aspects of the product, while ensuring that we include a mix of other features to include. If you look down that middle column on product, you really need a strong mix of functional reliability, ease of use, and frankly, elements that delight the user, with a focus more on the functional end and delightful kind of opportunistically sprinkled in to make the experience more fun and engaging. And so we're cognizant of making sure that the feature set that we're working on does a little bit of all of those things and moves the product further and further towards our vision. This quarter, we also made progress opening up testing on third-party data contracts to open up layer 2 to outside developers. This is already attracting a lot of new developers to the community, work on layer 3 applications while platform is still on EvoNet. And so it's really jump-started the activity that's taking place within the developer community. Bob will cover that in greater detail in the technology section today. And then in parallel, DCG is enhancing our existing wallets with Dash Pay functionality. And that's going to be our first layer 3 application. So let's turn our attention to market performance. If we flip to the next slide, up at the top, you'll notice that extreme price volatility returned to the crypto markets in the first quarter. And that wasn't unique to Dash. Bitcoin saw its highest volatility since the first quarter of 2018, which was really right at the height of the cryptocurrency increases that occurred back in 2017, 2018. Dash's volatility was the highest it's been since Q3 of 2014, going all the way back to the first year of its existence. Dash's daily volatility was highest in January. That was a period when Dash's value increased significantly. By February, the market was actually relatively calm, but in March, there was dramatic flight from risky assets as COVID-19 and an oil market price war seemed to impact almost all asset classes in a flight to cash. And in fact, in March, Bitcoin's volatility hit the highest level since Dash was launched, going all the way back to prior to 2014. And this volatility extended to the rest of the cryptocurrency space as well. I'll talk more a little bit later about the potential implications on the market of recent market-wide activity later in the year. Across a range of different metrics, Dash demonstrated continued growth, both quarter on quarter and year on year. Wallets installed on active devices increased by 21%. We now have over 100,000 wallets on active devices. Active addresses dropped slightly in the quarter. I wouldn't read too much into that. It seems more connected to a decrease in the use of private send than a decrease in the use of Dash overall. Private send mixing, which churns through a large number of fresh addresses, fell about 10% during the quarter, which explains the drop in active addresses despite an increase in overall Dash use. Unspent outputs increased about 5% in the quarter, which is consistent with some other metrics that we see. Active addresses with balances over $1. This is a metric that we typically present. It is not comparable quarter on quarter, since the data for Q1, which I noted on the last quarterly call, was unfortunately it wasn't captured until well into January. By that time, the price had increased to over $100. What that did is caused a large number of private send denominations to exceed $1 in value. Going forward, we've partly automated the capture of the data to eliminate the delay in capturing it from the data source that we use. And so I don't anticipate this will be a problem going forward. As you can see, all other metrics are showing strong growth. Total payment volume grew 84% during the quarter. Typical number of economic transactions per day grew to a new record of over 17,100 transactions. And that represented over 104% growth from the same quarter last year. I'd like you to note that that metric strips out all private send mixing transactions and Coinbase transactions. So these are truly economic transactions. Other similarly purposed networks grew transactions modestly as well during the quarter. Bitcoin on-chain transactions remained flat. Lightning Network capacity dropped slightly, though kind of in line with the value drop. But across the board, Bitcoin metrics seemed relatively flat. Bitcoin Cash had a strong quarter, double-digit growth in transactions, and Litecoin's transaction growth was in line with Dash at about 5%. So it does seem like there was modest growth across the board with similarly purposed coins. Price and market cap grew significantly during the quarter. Price increased about 60% and market cap grew about 63%. The price increase provided an opportunity for DCG to rebuild reserves, and Glenn will talk more about that in his section. On the next slide, you can see a visual representation of our recent key metrics. These show a pattern of consistent growth in usage and users, as you can see. And so overall, very pleased with the quarter, the way that it played out, both economically and from a user perspective. And I think it was as strong as a quarter as we could have hoped for. So very pleased with kind of where we're at. With that, I'll turn it over to Glenn to walk us through our financials.
Great, thank you, Ryan. Hi, Glenn here. I'll walk us through the Q1 financial results. In a slight departure from previous calls, I'd like to keep this section of the call a bit shorter and review the financials at a little bit of a higher level. So first, some of the usual disclosures. All of our accounting is done in USD to provide a stable picture of our financials. And since we are using mark-to-market accounting for our holdings of Dash, we're not reporting in accordance with US GAAP. As always, we'll review the balance sheet first. We'll discuss how we plan to deploy the funds on the balance sheet on behalf of the network in 2020. After that, we'll take a look at the income statement. And at the end, we'll just do a really quick summary of the quarter. All right. So taking a look at this slide here, the balance sheet, total assets increased 17% to 1.2 million quarter over quarter. 53% of those assets resided in core team salaries. Out of the 621,000 on the balance sheet, 56,000 is related to compensation accrued in March that hadn't been paid out at the end of the quarter. Additionally, we need to subtract out roughly $190,000 for expected salary payments we will make in April 2020, since these numbers include compensation proposal revenue earmarked for April salaries. After those adjustments, we're left with $375,000. That is our true compensation reserve, which is equivalent to about 2-month salary runway. Now, to be clear, this 2-month compensation reserve runway reflects extremely conservative assumptions that either a Dash Core Group compensation proposal has not passed or the price of Dash is zero. Assuming neither of these events occur, we're still going to be receiving revenue to offset our compensation costs, effectively meaning that our actual reserve runway is significantly longer than 2 months. The length of it would be determined by the price of Dash, and actually, to be even more precise, the price of Dash at which we convert into USD, and how aggressive we decide to be if we absolutely had to further reduce compensation expenses. Remember that the minimum amount of salary reserve we are comfortable with is 3 months, which is why for the next 2 budget cycles, we decided to request 60% of network funding specifically for compensation. Given the current expense structure, as long as the price of Dash stays north of $70 after the block reward reduction, we will be adding funds to our compensation reserve. Now let's take a look at our non-compensation portion of the balance sheet. I'm not going to do a deep dive into any particular category. I'll just say that we don't need to fund legal, infrastructure, or property lease at any point this year. That leaves business development and marketing as the only categories that we might want to fund at some point this year. For business development, we have $138,000 and a pretty good idea of how we want to allocate those funds. With coronavirus causing a slight slowdown in economic activity, we've seen a number of our partners hit the pause button on some of the planned integrations. As a result, we are working with a slightly lengthened timeline in terms of deploying business development funds. Ryan will touch upon the key integrations we had in Q1 in business development. As a reminder, we received funding from the network at the very end of December 2019, and we will most likely look to top up this category in July and August of this year. On the marketing and travel front, we ended the quarter with a balance of $66,000. Obviously, no travel occurred after January in Q1, and we don't anticipate any conferences or other events to restart in the short to medium term. On to our liabilities. We had $72,000 in accrued expenses. Additionally, we were holding around $47,000 in escrow, and that's on behalf of 2 entities, the Dash DAO Trust and Dash Japan. In Q1 2020, we generated net income of $141,000 after tax. Next slide, please. So this is our income statement for Q1 2020. Dash Core Group received revenue of $936,000, which was up 56% from Q4 2019. Revenue exceeded expenses before exchange losses and taxes by $222,000. At $601,000, 84% of our total expenses were related to compensation. Compensation expense was lower by 21% compared to Q4 2019. This was a direct result of having team members volunteer to work for free or significantly reduced salaries. We had a couple of headcount cuts as well, and we weren't backfilling any contractors who leave the project at this point. We had $113,000 in non-compensation expenses in Q1. We spent less in every single category of non-compensation except for business development. In Q1 2020, we recognized a loss of $81,000 as a result of the depreciation of Dash held on our balance sheet. This loss was generated by a timing difference between receiving the funds from the network and the lag it takes to liquidate the Dash in the open market. As I previously mentioned, net income was $141,000 in Q1. In summary, our current situation is stable. In the first quarter, we saw a lot of volatility in the price of Dash. In January, the price more than tripled, which helped us tremendously in terms of rebuilding our reserve. We faced headwinds starting at the end of February and into March, as Ryan kind of described the pricing dynamic. And overall, at the current price of $82, we are above our break-even point and putting funds away into our reserves. Next, Bob will take us through the technology update.
Thanks, Glenn. Appreciate that. It's always exciting to be able to take you through our accomplishments from the previous quarter and take a look into the current quarter activities and a little bit more into the future as well. What you're looking at is a roadmap. This is the format that we've been using over the last few quarters, and so hopefully that consistency helps you follow along and helps keep us accountable to the community as we continue to develop. We had a very strong first quarter with major releases across all of the products, and I'll walk through these product by product as we go down the page. So first off, our mobile team has been developing and continuing to develop and work on our native mobile wallets. And in Q1, we actually saw a new user interface released for the Dash wallet on both iOS and Android, some full general release and general availability, and others into a beta program and then moved into a release. This UI development doesn't have anything to do with the work surrounding evolution, but was just time to update the user experience overall. And we had very successful release and great response from that as we did so. In Q2 right now, we'll continue to do maintenance work with that UI on both iOS and Android. We have some additional UI improvements as we lead towards our actual Dash Pay wallet, which will be our next iteration of our native wallets. And so you'll see some continued UI enhancements there. Today, I'll show you a brief demo of Dash Pay wallet as far as registering usernames within the wallet. And there will be more demo experiences that we'll most likely be able to share with you as development continues during the second quarter. Our ultimate goal, obviously, is to have a full experience where we can register usernames on the blockchain, create contacts, contact requests, and accepting those, pay and get paid by username. And there has been great development on that from a back-end perspective. One of the demos that we thought about sharing was actually having everything wired together on L1 and L2 to handle transactions and the payments back and forth between usernames. We haven't put that together completely with our final UI designs, and so figure we'll save that for another call so we have more great things to share with you. But the mobile team has done some really great work coming together on design and development, both on the Android and the iOS side, and so you'll have more to look forward to this quarter. The Dash platform team, as you know, if we go back to the end of Q4, had the first release of Dash platform, and that was on a public testnet that we call EvoNet. And so for sake of following along in the presentation, you'll see references to EvoNet, which is a public testnet. In Q1, we added some key features to build community support, and those were allowing third-party data contracts. The initial contracts that are going to be required for Dash Pay are contracts that are being built by DCG, specifically our naming service, as well as the Dash Pay contract that has the ability to store contacts. We had a release in mid-March, which is EvoNet version 0.11, and that was made available in a public repository. We had a lot of information surrounding that release, and that is now being actively used in our development community. Corresponding with that, to ensure that we have a full SDK available, we saw upgrades to Dash.js as well as WalletLib. In the second quarter that we're in right now, and as Ryan mentioned, this was a very early call, only about 3 weeks into the new quarter. We have really great announcements. One came this week with the announcement that we released EvoNet version 0.12, which offered some great features. It was our initial implementation of a credit system. We simplified some things on our end on the platform architecture, combining our state machine with what we have been calling Dash Drive in the past. We simplified some things on using identities and made improvements to our distribution package as well. So had a really great release. That was a big push for the Dash platform team to release something, maybe 4 or 5 weeks after our v.11 release. And Dana, our product manager, outlined that in a recent blog post, if you haven't seen it, about an update to our release process for the team, where we're really shooting for releases about every 6 weeks, so every 2 to 3 sprints, to have a good solid release out on the network. Timing wise, what that does is that allows us to get another release out here still in Q2, which will be our v13, and again, upgrading and enhancing our SDK and the libraries associated with each of those. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on the next slide when I get to it, as far as final release or getting to MVP on Dash platform. Before I do that, I want to hit some of the great accomplishments on the core team. Obviously, this is the heart and soul of the network. This is what we rely on. These provide all of the transactions and the metrics that Ryan shared earlier for us. And in Q1, we did see a major release, version 0.15, which hit mainnet. That had some private send enhancements. We had some major, significant, I'll call them UI changes to the core wallet, the Qt wallet. And we had some enhancements from some stress tests that happened earlier in that quarter, maybe late Q4. And so it was a nice solid release, but definitely a major release. And I believe we had a good portion of Bitcoin backports in there as well. In Q2, where we're focused right now on the core team, is the emphasis has really been around more resiliency. We did have some additional stress tests that hit the network that provided some learnings for us. And there's 2 areas in particular that we're going to see some changes made that are going to be, I'd say, fairly significant as far as performance enhancements for masternodes as they participate in quorums. And so again, every time we have a stress test, we learn more. One of those is our concentrated recovery of LLMQ signatures. What basically right now is, as we have to recover those signatures, we propagate signatures across all LLMQ members. Those can be large quorums, and so we have quite a bit of traffic on that. And we saw that traffic having an impact on our chain lock reliability during times of stress on the network. And so we've the core team has developed another method that is as capable and as secure and reliable for us to do that, where we can select a concentrated or a single node to concentrate all of that activity to. We can rotate that through. It's done in a deterministic manner. So you'll hear more about the concentrated recovery of those signatures. We're anticipating, as far as the traffic and the overhead associated with that, a 40 to 50x improvement in that area. Another area that we saw under stress was handling sockets and the thread that handles that. And so a new implementation that is being referred to as ePull has been implemented. It's in final stages. If you follow along in the GitHub repos, you would have seen all of the changes going on with that. And that will be another significant performance improvement that may take CPU usage associated with that down by similar types of orders of magnitude. And so we're excited about both of those improvements. Again, just trying to ensure that the network is as resilient as possible and that we get full advantage of chain locks and that innovation that we put into place in previous versions. You'll also see a minimum protocol check that is being placed back into core with this release, and so this will become a required update for master nodes. Not all nodes, but if you're a master node, you will need to, we'll enforce a minimum protocol level starting with version 0.16. And also significant in these releases is the work to backport Bitcoin changes as well. And we've probably have over 600 changes that are going to be implemented in version 16. And so these are all part of our v16 release, and you can expect that to hit testnet very shortly. And you know, we'll always give you guidance on when we hit testnet. Can't always project how long it will take us to get to mainnet, and that's just based on the determination and this impact of the testing that we do. But getting to testnet is imminent for us. As we move forward in building a roadmap for core and some of the other things that we'll be looking forward to, one that has been a topic of discussion since our open house in December is how we can make improvement to the economics of Dash, and block reward reallocations has been one of those topics. And so if we do that and that gets voted in, obviously there'll be some changes there. We can always, there's many ideas as far as enhancing our proof of service and what we're doing on the network. There's been discussion about a flexible proposal system that has more flexibility in the amount of treasury that's associated with that, and more backports for additional versions of Bitcoin. Obviously not setting any targets on what releases any of those may fall into, because those are still being prioritized, designed, and determined whether or not we'll implement those in the product. But those are some of the key topics that we are talking about right now. So before I go on to the next slide, I just want to emphasize that it was a great Q1. We had a major release from every product team. Q2 is going to be aggressive from the standpoint that we have another major release hitting testnet for core, and not just one, but 2 releases from the Dash platform team. And that really demonstrates the velocity that we're picking up on that team, which is fantastic. And one thing to point out that might have come out on some other forums or calls is this was all accomplished with a smaller team. We had about a 20% reduction in our development team during the course of Q1. That didn't have a full impact on the entire quarter itself, but we've all done this. We've done this and accomplished this all with a leaner team, and it's a great team that's doing wonderful things together. Let's go to the next slide, and we'll dive down a little bit more into the platform scope of work for MVP. Late last year, as we started to head into our initial release of Dash platform, Dana wrote a blog post that was incorporated into a graphic that was put into our Q1 slide. This was, you know, so we're using a similar graphic at this point in time. And what this shows is the amount of work that's been accomplished in each of these areas. These 4 buckets that are on here did not align to specific releases. They weren't release targets by any means. They were just major components of work that we needed to do. We needed to create initial access to the platform so developers could access it, not only internal developers at DCG, but the community as a whole. We needed to make sure that the platform was secured, that there was proper incentives on the platform. And then obviously we know anything that needs to go to mainnet has a lot of final release cleanups and architectural and infrastructure types of improvements that need to be made in there. And so as we've released our initial release in December, V11 in March, and now V12 that was released this week, you can see represented with these icons those tasks and those areas that have been fully completed. Those that are near complete, and what I mark by that is, yeah, there's always things that you need to touch up kind of in the final stages. And so I'd hate to call something complete when we know that we're still going to tweak it a little bit as we get to the end. But near complete is a pretty accurate representation of that. Those are the ones that are shaded in black, fully shaded in or mostly shaded in. And then what you'll see in gray, which represents kind of 4 major areas of effort, are the major focuses for this second quarter that we're in right now. The team is doing great work. They're looking at the most effective and efficient ways to get the release out for the desired set of users and set of use cases that we have for our initial release, which obviously is to support the DashPay wallet, the establishment of usernames, and the ability to pay by usernames through contact lists. And so we're staying laser focused on that. And then what you'll see is those items left to do. And this isn't a, I'm not saying that all 4 of those items that are will be actively worked on this quarter are going to be completed, fully complete by the end of this quarter. It may be that some of them are just near complete, but that is the major focus for the development team. And then you'll see what's remaining as we move into Q3, and really some areas that we still have some debate on and some flexibility as far as how extensive our development is on that, how we can control the scope, and finally wrap that up to get it out to you. So overall, again, just emphasizing 3 releases so far, another one scheduled in June. We haven't scheduled out what might be 6 weeks after that, or how many more there will be to get to testnet. But hopefully this provides you with some real visibility into what it's going to take to get there, and it leaves just a few wrap-up items before we get to a testnet launch. Robert, if we go to the next slide, one of the exciting things about those first 2 releases that we've had in Q4 and Q1 on EvoNet is that it has allowed us to grow a community of developers, and that's very exciting. What you'll see here on this slide is some screenshots from Discord and the DApp developers channel that's on Discord. And what I just want to kind of point out to you, if you haven't had a chance to visit it, is the opportunity and invitation to join the discussion that's going on there. The discussion centers around what the components are, and it's not just our documentation, which is in our developers portal as well, but it's really the discussion components around it. And so our developers are active on it. Obviously, that's a balancing act, because we do also need to stay focused on our development tasks themselves. But I appreciate the level of involvement that our developers have engaged in those discussions as far as clarifying points. And as the community learns more, obviously the early adopters in the community then become the subject matter experts that can share that information as well. One of the very active areas in the channel is the bounties discussion, which is supported by proposals that have gone through the Dash network. And this provides a level of funding to create bounties for worthy projects. And this isn't managed by DCG, this is managed by the community at large. And we're really excited about what stimulus that has created for the development community overall. And I'd invite you to engage in the discussion and become familiar with the bounties that are being thrown out there to attract developers in the right areas. Obviously, there's other research going on. I love the fact that there's a Trello board out. This is being project managed as well. This isn't just a community for mudslinging and trolling. This is a community of engaged developers who want to get things done, and tracking things in a Trello board is just some evidence of that. So I applaud the community for doing such. There's also been quite a bit of active development. Some of this has been initiated by the community at large. Some was initiated within DCG and now taken over by the community. And you can see, based on those bullet items, some of the examples that we have in there. Memo Dash was a very early DApp and proof of concept that was created well over a year ago. And that continues to be upgraded and enhanced in here. The discussions around merchant directories, governance tools, things that may be a little further out on our overall roadmap as we stay focused on Dash Pay delivery are being discussed, and there's been active development on that. And so that's exciting because it will drive requests and scope for the protocol at the Dash platform protocol level as well. So the more we have this community engaging on the fringe and future development starts to focus us on the things that need to be developed at the protocol level. There's been the Dash development suite is really looking at opportunities to have a simple development framework, something that would provide an efficient workflow similar to what might be in Truffle for developers, and doing that for Dash platform. A very worthwhile project. The Chrome wallet is really kind of a non-Dash Pay wallet that can be completely handled inside of a web browser and for non-Dash Pay dApps. And so that's exciting to see work going on in that, and overcoming all of the challenges surrounding signing and verification that would need to happen, and how that can happen most securely inside of a browser. And the last one I'll just point out is Dash Platform Console. This was an idea, as we were moving into our first release, which the question is, well, how can we validate or query the data that's actually now on the network? And the answer was, well, let's build a console, and we can do that. And so it was what was called Dash Platform Console. And so now you can query contracts, you can query identities and usernames and those types of things. But it wasn't core to what we should be doing as a platform development team. And with some level of hesitation, we said, well, let's throw it out to the community and see if they pick up on it. And to the community, thank you for picking up on it. You've enhanced it. The UI is cleaner. The scope of features and the feature set in there is significant. And so as any of you in the development community build your own dev nets and start to take these tools out, the Dash Platform Console would be one of those things that you'd want to have at your side, so you're not writing code to query data, but you have another way to do that. So just in summary on this is, as the core group at Dash, we really rely on an active community of developers to leverage our product and to enhance our feature set. And since that initial release in Q4, we've seen what was the anticipated establishment of that community and the growth of the community. And obviously, just because we anticipated that it would come didn't mean that it would. And so we're excited to have it as vibrant as it is. And let's move on to the final slide here. As we look at this, we'll just let this demo run through, but this is a current demo of the Dash Pay wallet. And this is simply the registration, the UX around username registration. And so as you can see from a home screen, it was an easy click to jump into the ability to create a Dash username. This is being created in here. There's validation on it. I believe the rule set right now is between 3 and 24 characters. It is letters and numbers only. As that username is created, there will be a fee associated with it. This is only representative in the UI that shows that it's a .01 dash for it, but the fee will be calculated and displayed. Obviously, to ensure good security, this will be PIN protected in the wallet. And then the username is actually being created on the Dash network. And we have notifications to let the person know that when it's done. Obviously, if we're creating identities, establishing usernames, and you can see the demo is finished out there saying that the username is ready to use. But as we go through these multiple steps to invoke each of those transactions, the UI and the UX is intended to simplify it, and that's what you saw in the simplification there. And so this is a a demo that we'll probably publish at some point in time. We just thought it would be useful to share with the community today as we go through this quarterly call. But to emphasize, and if you look at the bullet items on the left, this tells you exactly what you saw today. This was native client code. This was iOS code. It's a build v 5.0, build 9, as you can see. These are transactions that are using encrypted payment channels on L1. This is a live network that's working. That we call it mobile DevNet. It is EvoNet that we've just forked and given a separate environment for the mobile team so they can use that for their own development efforts. And it's using Dash Wallet, it's using the Dash Sync library. And these are the latest Dash Pay designs. This is our design library right now. And we won't say final because we may tweak it slightly, but all of this code that you saw running today to run the DevNet as well as the UI is all in our public repositories on GitHub. So this is not a proof of concept. This is not a prototype or mock-ups, but this was an actual demo. We'll continue to give you peeks into the development of the product as we go on. I'm only taking advantage of this at a quarterly call because it came up and we would, but I'd look to Brian Foster and the mobile team to give you snippets of this as we go through some of our other major features that are being built. As I mentioned, the way we're building this is we often build the back-end transactions, making sure that everything's working architecturally and at the transactional level to ensure integrity there. And then obviously couple that with the user experience. And so one of the other demos that we've had this week was the payment, the user requests going back and forth to add to the contact list and then payment between usernames. We didn't have the UI on it, so we chose not to share that today, but that might be something for the community to expect to be coming from our product management team shortly. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Ryan and let you take it further.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, I can't express the enthusiasm that I have for the work that the developers have done. This stuff is exciting. It was exciting for me, and I'm sure it's exciting for the community to see these things live and working in a real environment. And I think it demonstrates kind of the rapid progress that we've been making since that initial version back in December. And so not only is platform coming together, but now the layers that are going to utilize it. And so very exciting to kind of see the fruits of that work. And so at this point, I think we'll shift to the growth discussion and talk a little bit about the accomplishments that the business development team and marketing team have had during the first quarter. In Venezuela, starting at the top here, we onboarded a new point of sale and payment card provider, Glufco. Glufco offers physical crypto cards, point of sale devices, and software solutions for payments. And we're going to be working with Glufco to deploy their solutions to grow the merchant base in Venezuela. This is another one of those ways that we can grow the merchant base at scale by leveraging payment providers that are already operating within the country. We also organized a crypto education event in early March in partnership with Pro Franquicias, which is an association for franchise owners within the country. The event was held in a theater. It attracted nearly 200 attendees, which was great. Those were mostly franchise owners and operators, but also many of our payment partners that offer Dash services. So it was a well-attended event. There was great interest in accepting Dash by the attendees, and we continue to follow up on the leads that were generated from the event. As I said, that event was held in early March. Obviously, the coronavirus-related shutdown certainly will slow some of the results from that. But we anticipate that as the country opens back up, we're going to be able to leverage a lot of the relationships that we built at that conference that we held. For our trading strategy, we made significant progress in a number of areas. Simplex is not a consumer brand. You probably don't recognize it, but if you bought cryptocurrency using a credit or debit card, there's a good chance that you utilize their services in the background. Simplex is B2B player. They're widely used in the industry to power card-based purchases. And this integration provides much easier access to Dash. We've seen a number of Simplex-powered exchanges turn on Dash transactions for card-based purchases. And so that's a critical piece of infrastructure for the network. HitBTC integrated chain lock deposits during the quarter. As well, we saw Whitebit, which is a major exchange in Russia, and they were actually the first exchange to activate both instant send and chain lock. So even in the rare event that an instant send lock fails, the user will still benefit from fast chain lock deposits. And so that's been a great addition. Coinbase, they were previously integrated Dash in their Brazil operation. They have now added Dash to their global exchange with a USDT pair, and they've added support for margin trading as well. In addition to these integrations, we also received a 1.0 score from the Crypto Rating Council. Now, a score of 1 means that the council's analysis suggests the asset has few or no characteristics consistent with treatment as an investment contract and therefore is not a security under US federal securities laws. This is the best score possible and places Dash on the same score as Bitcoin. In fact, there's only 4 other non-stablecoin assets that have been awarded this low score. And so the reason this rating is so important, particularly to Dash, is that many exchanges had expressed concerns about our security status due to a lot of our unique features like the treasury system. And that really caused a reluctance to list Dash in some circumstances. Thanks to the legal efforts that we put in back starting late 2018 and through 2019, we were able to present a very compelling legal opinion that the CRC assessed to be very credible. And that rating puts to bed really any remaining doubts about whether Dash violates security laws. And so this really streamlines conversations that we have with exchanges as a result, if any concerns do exist. Concerning our remittance strategy, we integrated Toros Exchange in Mexico, along with 14,000 ATMs. They're integrated into their platform with the exchange. And that's really a first step towards a remittance solution for Mexico. And we're going to be leveraging that to create a corridor to Venezuela. I would note that the Toros integration also allows for bidirectional self-service for Mexico residents as well, to either receive money from abroad or to send money really anywhere in a self-serving, self-service type of use case. And so now that that exchange is operating, we're working with them on a service that utilizes that integration for easy to use remittance solutions, specifically targeting the Mexico to Venezuela corridor. So it'll have a separate landing page, a simple user interface, simply for the purposes of sending remittances. In other categories, we did integrate with the Skrill wallet during the quarter. Skrill is an e-commerce payments and money transfer business that focuses on low-cost international transfers. Skrill does not allow users currently to deposit or withdraw any cryptocurrencies at this time, but users can exchange within their Skrill wallets. Skrill has about 40 million users globally, and should Skrill open their wallets in the future to enable deposits and withdrawals, that could, of course, complement our remittance strategy in the future. Right now, it's a little bit limiting in terms of being able to support that. The last integration that we have here is ReadyRater. ReadyRater was founded by the co-founder of Vega Wallet, and ReadyRater is it's an esports platform. It provides valuable tools to players like raid and loot management for guilds. Basically, guilds are teams that work together, and you know, the performance of an individual team member may not match necessarily the rewards that they gather during the game. And so this tool provides performance overviews of the individual players, captures all of the loot that the entire team gathered, and allows them to kind of split up that loot more equitably based on performance. It also allows entry into esports tournaments. The platform has rapidly increased its user base. They have over 500 guilds, thousands of players, and the platform currently supports World of Warcraft only, but other esports games are being added. We sponsored an esports tournament with ReadyRater, and Dash payments will be the default payment method for the platform once payments are activated. For the time being, the platform is free, and it's really addressing a unique need within the space that you know, the growth that they've had really demonstrates. So we're hoping to be able to leverage that in our esports category. We also participated in a number of events this quarter. Our business development team attended the North American Bitcoin Conference in January. They both met with existing partners and identified potential new integrations. And I conducted an AMA with finance.us, their user base, and they told us it was their best attended event thus far. During the AMA, I got the opportunity to kind of explain the benefits of Dash to crypto traders and talk about our unique use cases. So it was a good opportunity to gain some exposure for Dash. Next is a drill down into our Venezuelan strategy, one of the initiatives that we focused on. If we could flip to the next slide. One of the initiatives we focused on was really taking everything that we've learned in Venezuela and refining our efforts within the country. Venezuela is a constantly changing market, and it requires frequent adjustments in order to optimize our growth. And Dash's progress within the country continues to change, and that in and of itself requires adjustments. And so kind of in the past, local teams in Venezuela focused most of their energy on merchant acquisition, and many of these efforts were independently pursued, meaning there was kind of some coordination, but fairly limited coordination happening between the teams and bringing together an overall strategy. As a starting point, I think that focusing on the merchant was the correct side of the chicken and egg problem to try to solve. Merchants were generally more willing to experiment than consumers. And any incremental consumers are really welcome in the merchant. And so there really weren't a lot of reasons for them not to accept Dash payments once they got educated on it. However, usage has remained low, with the majority of merchants reporting less than 1% of transactions are in Dash, typically. There are some exceptions, but for the most part, usage is kind of hovering around 0.5% of transactions. While merchants are generally happy with the experience that they've had with Dash, it is important for merchant retention and for future growth that we expand the base of users paying in Dash. And so at DCG, we really think that more attention is needed to drive the consumer usage, and that solely focusing on merchants for future growth would have limited benefit at this point without starting to balance those two and starting to bring in more effort on the usage side. So what we've done is we've developed a far more comprehensive growth strategy, and it more holistically grows the ecosystem. We then shared our views and plans with the teams working in Venezuela and aligned all of those teams about how we can work more closely together and on how Dash can grow the base of users in a more systematic way. And the response from the local teams was very enthusiastic. Starting in Q1, we're going to be focusing more of our attention on solving some of the hardest problems for growing usage in Venezuela. First, we need to create ways that users can earn Dash. And so that's the putting Dash into the hands of people. And second, we need to really empower users to more easily spend it within their community. So there's 5 actions we're taking. The first is, as I mentioned, we held a meeting with the roughly 30 Dash community members, including the 3 currently funded teams, in order to deep dive into this strategy and make it a sustainable plan, and then elaborate actions on how each of us could align our efforts and help each other achieve that success. The second is we're going to be focusing a lot more attention on remittances and earning solution that will enable people to earn Dash as part of their paycheck or through remote work from paying customers from abroad. And then they can take and go and spend that Dash in order to grow the ecosystem. So this contrasts with the current situation in which a lot of users must first exchange their current earnings, say in Bolivars, for Dash, and then go and spend it. Earning Dash directly really shifts that friction from having to acquire Dash to, well, spending is actually the easier way to go. And so what we're doing is we're really creating a frictionless experience compared to the friction and cost of exchanging Dash for local currencies. If you're natively earning Dash, it makes sense to go out and spend it. However, consumers that earn Dash, they also need to be empowered with ways to identify how they can spend it. We're therefore working on tools that will drive users to reliable, updated information on how and where to spend their Dash. That'll improve kind of the experience, and we're really, looking to improve tools like Discover Dash and provide ways for merchant preference to be incorporated into the listings. Too often, users will trek to a merchant only to find out that a manager needs to be present in order to pay for Dash, for example, and that manager is, say, out running an errand. And so the key will be directing users towards merchants that deliver the best experience possible. We're also going to be complementing these efforts by expending more effort towards localized social media. As an example, we recently launched Dale con Dash on the most important social media channel used by Venezuelans, in order to connect directly with users and be able to educate them on how to use Dash, where to go spend it, etc. Of course, merchant acquisition remains critical to our efforts, and as we expand the merchant base, it becomes, it really gives more options to the earners to go out and spend their Dash. Merchants earning Dash will collect more of their income in Dash, which means they could potentially pay employees or suppliers with it. And so we're really focusing on discussions with larger point of sale providers in Venezuela to be able to scale this to the next level. We can't continue to sign on individual merchants at a time and expect to reach very large numbers. So we're expected to produce a joint announcement in mid-March with a small but fast-growing point of sale provider as our first one. The coronavirus quarantine unfortunately delayed our announcement because it prevented the team from going out and training the stores that they needed to train on the new features. So we expect to announce that new partnership probably within a few weeks after quarantine is lifted in the country. And in the future, we're going to continue to pursue larger point of sale integrations to scale our acceptance And at the same time, direct to point of sale integration is going to lead to improvements in the user experience, because you're not going to be transacting with somebody's phone, but rather the devices that are right there at the counter. And so we believe that this broadened scope of activities is going to lead to higher growth rates in Venezuela going forward. And the strategy has really reinvigorated, I'd say, the local teams in Venezuela and given us all a lot more comprehensive strategy to rally around. And with that, we'll shift into Outlook. So concerning the outlook, I'd like to share kind of my personal thoughts on the cryptocurrency markets overall, Dash's outlook within that context, and the prospects for Dash's continued growth. I'd also like to discuss the timeline for our set of proposals we plan to submit to the network related to the store value discussion that I initiated our open house back in December. As you know, I usually don't prognosticate on price and markets, but we're living through some really unusual times, and we're doing so just as Bitcoin approaches its third halving of the block reward. So I feel really compelled at this point in time to share some of my hypotheses on how these events might shape our future. We're also in uncharted territory, so I hope that my thinking can add value to your own assessment of the situation. This is not investment advice, you know, I think that it's probably part of some overall thinking that you can take into account in terms of how things are likely to progress from here. As I said, we're really living through historic moment for financial markets, roiled by multiple global disruptions. Central banks are injecting enormous sums of stimulus into the markets at an unimaginable scale. And they're expanding purchases not only of government bonds, but also investment grade corporate bonds, junk bonds, and some countries are even purchasing equities. There's really been tremendous appetite for cash as this series of crises have unfolded. As an example, the M2 money supply of the US dollar grew by about 15% recently on an annualized basis. There is reason to fear increases in inflation, something that would be especially damaging in a low return environment like we're in right now. These are precisely the market conditions that cryptocurrency is capable of addressing. My observation is that there's been a kind of a sense of disappointment in a subset of the crypto space that Bitcoin and the rest of crypto markets have not immediately rallied in defiance of such a dramatic and, in my opinion, quite reckless expansion of fiat supply. I personally think that there are several reasons why it's likely far too early to judge the implications for the crypto market. Bitcoin sets the stage for the entire crypto space. So the way Bitcoin reacts is important for other digital assets as well. And in fact, most of the cryptocurrency prices, including Dash, are highly correlated to Bitcoin due to its current dominance. So it's worth evaluating the overall market starting with Bitcoin, and then I'll talk a little bit about Dash. Here's why I think it's too early to judge the reaction. First, we need to acknowledge that a good portion of the cryptocurrency market cap consists of speculative bets on future adoption. In other words, cryptocurrencies remain high-risk assets. A great deal is unknown about future adoption. Which coins will gain adoption at scale? What share of the global market will they occupy, and over what time frame? So it's therefore quite natural that in an overall market-wide retreat from risk to safety, that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies would feel an immediate impact, even if their long-term prospects are actually improved by the issues going on with fiat currencies. It's unrealistic to expect that investors currently needing to raise cash would view their crypto assets as somehow off limits, or that out of work individuals wouldn't need to sell some of their assets to pay expenses. Second, I think that we shouldn't expect to immediately witness a shift happening. In my opinion, cryptocurrency as a whole has held up incredibly well through this crisis. And it's done so without the help of government intervention that nearly all other asset classes have enjoyed. So think about that. The third is falling Bitcoin prices in March, which hit their lowest level in about a year, seems to have caused many mining operations to prematurely face much of the revenue pressure that was already expected to happen in May due to the halving event. The calculus for miners in such situations is to assess the reaction in network hash rate. And many mining operators will actually operate at a loss while they force less efficient miners to shut off older equipment or determine whether the market will improve and their mining equipment will return to profitability. That shakeout period costs money, and it often depletes their inventories that they need to liquidate on the open market, some of the inventory from their mining. The result is actually incremental selling pressure and depleting mining inventories during those times. If you'd asked me prior to March, my expectations were that going into the halving in May, it would have little immediate impact. And in fact, miners might continue operating at a loss for a time before determining what portion of their equipment was unable to compete, how much of it they should shut off and drop from the network. It seemingly takes time for incoming mining revenue to work its way through to affect the flow of sell orders on exchanges to pay for their operations. Inventories and liquidation strategies, for example, selling through OTC desks that don't immediately hit the market, mean that a drop in block rewards would never have an immediate impact. And therefore, it might not be until late summer that the change in supply began reflecting on exchanges. We saw similar market behavior back in 2016 when the last halving event occurred. And when the price dropped in the immediate aftermath of the halving, it took a couple of months before that started to recover. And so I think there's some data to support kind of that narrative. But I think as a result of weakened miner balance sheets due to the events in March, I think we may see a slightly more rapid reaction to the halving. Inventory buffers are likely thinner than they were prior to mid-March, and therefore a change in miner rewards is likely to flow through to affect prices more quickly. I now think that we're probably going to start to see price impact by mid-summer. I also think that it's unlikely the effect of lower inflation would be immediately impacting prices, because I think if you look at, for example, this week's oil price crash, the lesson is that markets aren't very efficient at acting, or they're not acting very efficiently during the coronavirus crisis. Recent events demonstrate that the market can be bad at reflecting even known data in real time under times of stress and rapid change. That could mean that the market won't see the full impact of Bitcoin's May halving until after it passes. I also think a lot of mainstream and financial market media attention that might otherwise now be directed at Bitcoin's halving could be drowned out at the moment by the constant stream of coronavirus, oil, earnings, and stimulus news that draws attention and mindshare elsewhere. In short, I think markets, whether oil or cryptocurrency, might not be functioning properly until there's a dramatic reality check on supply and demand. With Bitcoin supply about to drop in a significant way, I think we are yet to find out whether the halving is priced into crypto markets. My personal opinion is that I think it's not. I think there's simply not enough information out there about it. I don't think the mainstream is aware of it to the extent that it should be. And I don't think that the markets are functioning efficiently at the moment. So as I mentioned earlier, there is a significant correlation between Bitcoin and Dash, but Dash's price is obviously not directly tied to Bitcoin, and especially over long periods of time. Our own market really behaves differently. So I believe that Bitcoin is likely to lose market share if prices and usage accelerates as they did in the year following the last halving. Because of Dash's market positioning as a low-cost, scalable, and reliable payment network, and our near ubiquity on exchanges, Dash is likely to be disproportionately benefiting from congestion if it returns to Bitcoin's network. So I think we're well positioned if Bitcoin does grow significantly as a result of this financial change to their network. I don't believe that the presence of Lightning Network significantly changes that equation, in part because opening and closing channels requires on-chain transactions or third-party custody solutions, and it adds complexity to the user experience. So even a small amount of Bitcoin's market cap flowing over into the rest of the cryptocurrency space is likely to have very significant impacts on smaller projects. I also think that Dash is entering a new level of maturity in our own right. Dash has consistently grown usage and users for each of the last 6 quarters. The rate of inflation is beginning to drop, and we have our own supply reductions every year. And it just so happens that we're going to experience one at roughly the same time as Bitcoin in May. So we have been aggressively pursuing instant send and chain locks integrations on the exchanges. The network effects from that work continues to grow with each additional integration that we onboard. And we've got a solid pipeline of major exchanges that we'll add in the near future with those features. So our adoption in Venezuela is also entering kind of a new phase that I'm excited about as we move beyond a focus mostly on merchant acquisition and really grow the usage. And we're also beginning to sign point of sale integrations that will enable us to scale on the merchant side within Venezuela to an extent that we haven't been able to do before. So from a technology standpoint as well, we're nearing the completion of platform. We've opened third-party data contracts in March. We recently added new developers or attracted new developers to come work on apps that will benefit the ecosystem. With the releases that occurred in December, March, and April, and another coming in about 6 weeks, the pace of development has visibly accelerated. The team is making much more rapid progress, and that progress is evident in the pace of releases that we've never had before. Additionally, a good portion of the remaining functionality that we previously outlined may not be necessary for the first mainnet release. So our first mainnet release is rapidly coming into view. I think that will allow us to deploy kind of that long-awaited benefits that DashPay has to offer, and that should accelerate our growth further. So in short, a great deal of value has accrued to the network, and it's poised to be captured. This work has been accruing for years in technology innovations, business partnerships, and quiet growth in usage and users. The feedback that we consistently receive from exchanges and partners is that Dash is the most professional community with whom they interact. And I can't stress that enough. We almost always get this feedback. And that professionalism is in the very culture of Dash. So from the outside, I'm sure there are many folks that scan market cap rankings to gauge kind of the success of projects. As Dash continues to grow more consistently than nearly any other project, I think we're getting our swagger back. I think that we're emerging as one of those projects that has a chance to seemingly come out of nowhere to surprise many people in the industry. And what they don't see from the outside is the years of hard work from developers, local teams, marketing, and business development efforts across the globe with multiple teams that have led to a moment of success. And what they don't see is the rigor of our growth strategy, our accumulated knowledge of the markets that we're targeting. They don't see the quality of the products that we've been building. And none of those things have happened overnight. But I think that Dash is extremely well positioned to take advantage of a unique set of circumstances, developing both in the broader markets and in cryptocurrency specifically. And I think this year, Dash is really going to turn a lot of heads. So before I close, I just briefly would like to comment on our plans to approach the network with a specific proposal concerning Dash's economics. This is a topic that is on a lot of people's minds. It's an incredibly complex and critical topic for the future of the network, so it deserves its own presentation to properly present our findings and proposal to the community. I consider the research phase of that project to be complete, and we have a much more refined understanding and a better understanding of the economics of the network and how the various options would likely affect it. I plan to host a dedicated video conference in approximately 3 weeks to review the findings in depth, share a potential set of solutions, answer questions related to them, and set a timeline for final debate and voting. The aim of that work is to address the issues outlined in a presentation entitled Improving Dash as a Store of Value during our core team open house event back in December. If you haven't seen it, there are videos posted on our channel that you can go and watch that. Again, the name is Improving Dash as a Store of Value. We want to address the issues that were presented in that presentation, and we want to address them in a minimally disruptive way because major changes introduce risk and uncertainty. Past changes to the network economics have proven just how sensitive changing network economics can be and how delicate of a process that can be. So we want to dedicate a high degree of critical thinking and rigor to our analysis, and the proposed solutions that we're coming up with, we really want to ensure that we're not making any missteps. I'm extremely satisfied that we can address the shortcomings of the network economics in a low risk manner, and I'm quite convinced that we have a solution that will satisfy the community. We will set a specific date and time to share our findings with the network about a week prior. We haven't set a specific date and time yet, but you should plan for that presentation to occur around mid-May. I would be interested in hearing if people would prefer that were held on a weekday or a weekend. A series of decision proposals could be submitted to the network for the June cycle, assuming the community reaction is supportive. And I appreciate the patience that the community has had over the last quarter, as I know there's been a lot of enthusiasm for pursuing these improvements and a real recognition that they can have an impact. We'll finally be moving to make a decision in the near future. So I really look forward to kind of wrapping up that work and presenting our findings and potential solution to the network. So I think other than the coronavirus going around, the dysfunctional oil markets, a crashing world economy, and the massive expansion of government spending, I'm really bullish on 2020. I'd also like to point out, if you didn't see the Dash Investment Foundation quarterly call earlier this week, Dash will soon be backed by more gold than the US dollar. They got their accounts, and I'm really looking forward to hearing that the first gold hedging strategy has occurred. And so I think there's just a lot to be excited about, and I'm excited to see how the rest of this year plays out. I'm personally very optimistic about Dash's future in particular. And thanks for listening. So that's really it for today as far as our prepared remarks. And thank you so much for joining. I hope you found it informative, whether you're new to the Dash community or have listened to our quarterly calls in the past. As with our other quarterly calls, there's an appendix in the slides that you'll be able to access after the call. That includes additional detail on Dash Core Group, network metrics over the last 5 quarters, and a data glossary, accomplishments from the quarter, and an overview of what we're working on next within each of the departments. And at this point, I'll turn it back over to Robert to remind everybody of the process that will follow for the Q&A session. So thanks so much for listening and joining us.
Thank you very much, Ryan, for outstanding comments about the Dash fundamentals. Thank Glenn for financial insights and Bob for information about the technical updates and great demo. Let's move on with Q&A. We have collected way more than 20 questions from the different community channels. I have placed only 10 of them on the slide for you. So the rest of the questions will be answered on the forum and published a little bit later. We have also collected 2 questions from the YouTube chat, and we will try to answer all of them. So without further ado, let's move on. First question, how important do you think is the ability to send Dash to usernames without first having to add each other to contact lists? If any, what are the obstacles that prevent you from having usernames as public tipping address rolled out with the initial release of DashPay?
Sure, I'll take that. I'll answer kind of the two separate questions that are involved with that. So how important is it to be able to do that? We did not think that it was the most important to be able to pay to a username without having them be in a contact list. And that's why we prioritized the workflows that have been set up, which is contacts and contact list management is a separate function from the payment function. And we have done that mostly to prioritize security, to make sure that we know that we have two parties accepting a contact request and that we know that that username that's in your contact list is somebody that you know. That obviously prevents you from inadvertently sending funds to a contact that you think the username is kind of close, but you know it's off by a character or something like that. And so we felt like that was the right prioritization of our MVP stories. But having an integrated user experience where you could go in and say, I want to make a payment to a username, and you put in, whatever demo-1 as we saw earlier today, and it recognizes that that's not part of your contact list, and it sets up and does the same establishment from a security perspective to validate that user and have them accept you, then again, we're prioritizing security, but having a more streamlined UX there. And so that was something that we didn't want to build into MVP, but will likely be a very fast follower for us. So we think it's important, but we didn't think that it was the most critical. As far as public tipping addresses, really we have two things there. One is how do we tip, and whether we can do that in an easy manner and in a public manner. And so obviously if developers want to put their public key address on a footer and say, hey, send me a tip if you guys like what I did, or if you like this code, that seems like that's the typical use case around it. We'll see in a traditional payment platform, somebody says, hey, here's my Venmo address, send me $1. And so there are specific use cases for it. We don't think it's the most common use case. And so again, that's why it wasn't necessarily in MVP. There's several ways that public tipping could be set up. Again, we want to make sure that we know who that's being sent to, that people can accept it. And obviously, as you manage public personas, if contacts are to remain private, different people have different levels of comfort in how those usernames or addresses might be out there. So obviously we still have, the traditional, all of the wallets will have the traditional methods. And so if a QR code could still be put out there, we could still use other addresses, but we'll see those coming in after MVP. Hopefully that helps explain to the person who asked the questions. Good question.
Thanks, Bob. Good answer. The second is, I believe, also to you. Will we see the Dash platform on mainnet before Q3 this year?
Yeah, that's a great question. Before Q3, the answer would be no, because that would mean that it would have to be delivered this quarter. And hopefully, this question was submitted prior to seeing our roadmap and the progress chart against the major components. And so what you saw today was, what will be left over at the end of Q2 to continue to develop. And so, what I've been doing, and I feel really comfortable doing, is saying, one, when can we get to testnet? And then secondly, making sure that I'm making commitments for this quarter and, where I feel comfortable going into the next quarter. So the next quarter being Q3 at this point in time, I'm not comfortable saying that it will definitely be on testnet in Q3. What I am comfortable in saying is that we're managing the scope very rigorously, the entire team, because we want it to get to testnet as quickly as possible. And so I think we've all provided as good of an insight as anyone has today we want to make sure that the product is well suited for the purpose at hand. And so no, it won't be out before Q3. But as you saw again in the presentation, there is a very small set of tasks left to do after Q2 of this year. So I'll leave it at that for today.
Yep. Thanks, Bob. Number 3, will DCG look into submitting a budget proposal to have at least one DCG team member working full-time on product adoption in Venezuela?
Yes, I will take this one. Not in the short term, as we just saw, we have a new, more detailed strategy for Venezuela. Some of those actions are already going on. Some will start in the next few weeks. Those costs are paid with business development and marketing budgets. And that's what we will do for the foreseeable future, because this is just one more market where DAS is trying to achieve things. So we don't see a reason to separate it completely from the others. And it's a multi-budget and department effort. Having said that, we have our head of business development, Ernesto Contreras, who is himself Venezuelan. So we have a very deep understanding and knowledge of the market, which it's great for us, obviously. And also we have a lot of great local teams with whom we are gonna get more involved in the near future. And we've started to get more involved with them. So we can all work in a more coordinated fashion, as Ryan detailed before. So not hiring someone separately, but it will have a bigger share of our time and budget in the next few months.
Thank you, Fernando. Number 4, you have mentioned a little bit about this, Ryan. However, there were many questions around the topic, so I have decided to place it on the presentation. Let's share some comments. Number 4 is request for an update from DCG on any proposal to change the percentages of block rewards and or the treasury.
Yeah, as I said earlier, this is a very meaty topic, requiring a great deal of explanation and depth of analysis to really kind of create the backdrop for the decisions that were made and what we're proposing to the network. And so I am going to be holding a separate video conference with the community to share that information and then answer any Q&As associated with it. But specific dates will be released here within another week or two.
Thanks. I think many are waiting for this. Number 5, what are the team's thoughts around introducing smart contracts? There are just so many beneficial elements that are derived from the ability of entrepreneurs to utilize smart contracts that I would think giving developers the option to utilize should outweigh any downside risk.
Yeah, I'll take that. Our team is generally interested in adding smart contract functionality to the platform. We think that that would be helpful at some point in the future. Obviously, we've all had the benefit of looking at smart contract implementations in other projects, and we see the benefits of them. So that we don't need to be sold on that. I think the usability of them, how broadly they'd be used, and then the level of effort to build it into a Dash platform is probably the more significant thing. So right now, it is not on our roadmap. And that doesn't mean that it couldn't get on there very easily. But we would definitely also want to engage our master nodes as far as understanding the implications of running, some sort of virtual machine, adding to kind of the infrastructure load there, and make sure that we're handling those trade-offs properly. I think the best thing to do would be to engage the community. And so going back to that Discord channel, creating a discussion around smart contracts and the implementation of them, And so the community at large can engage in that thought process of defining what the specific use cases would be that we would want to target first, what the specific scenarios or personas that we're trying to address could really help us develop that scope. And then it takes it out of smart contracts, this whole big thing that has to be developed, and maybe we can start implementing things on a more incremental basis. So for It's Crazy Bro who asked that question to us, love to have you, just be an active member of the community, engage in the conversation, and help us define what smart contracts would mean and how they could be implemented within Dash platform. So today, again, not on the roadmap. Everybody's interested in them because we've seen smart contracts deployed before, and it's time to start the discussion because all of the foundational aspects of Dash platform will be released soon.
Great, thank you, Bob. Question number 6. I noticed that DCG funding requests have had their asks reduced in accordance with the upcoming block reward reduction. What is the new Dash target break-even price for DCG funding?
I'll take that one. So yeah, we've committed to not taking more than 60% of the total proposal revenue available from the network. So, as the block reward reduction occurs, we correspondingly also ask for less Dash for Dash Core Group. And I touched upon it during the presentation, but the new break-even price is $70. So anything above $70, we're putting away funds towards our reserve. Anything lower than 70, and we're starting to eat into our reserve.
Thanks. I think the next one is also related.
Yeah, I'll also take up the next one around how the reserve fund is holding up and how the morale is on core. Is everyone doing okay? So in terms of the reserve fund, I kind of dove into that during the financial review. To reiterate, our non-compensation account is in really good shape. Our compensation account right now holds 2 months salary, and there we really like to be at a minimum of 3 months, which is why we submitted 2 compensation proposals to the network for that 60% of the total proposal funds. As far as morale, I would say overall it's good. We've had some great progress in terms of our technology, our Dash platform releases that Bob referred to. The price is above our break even right now. So overall, the team is working well together, and we're just really excited about 2020 and continuing to deliver.
Cool. Thank you, Glenn. Question number 8. To cut down on the network's annual legal expenses, could the trust absorb the functions of the DIF, or the DIF absorb the functions of the trust? Why or why not?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one. So I think the short answer is it is probably not as beneficial as one might think, and there are some downsides to it. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I do think that there are limitations here. First, in terms of the legal expenses, currently the legal expenses for the trust are relatively low. They don't require the same level of government or licensed oversight the way that the DIF does. And part of that is just due to the limited activities that the trustee is required to execute. So, once these entities are set up, maintaining them is much less expensive than the setup. The second thing that I would point out is they really have different purposes. And because of the different purposes, the network probably benefits from installing different skill sets to oversee a technology delivery company, Dash Core Group, versus overseeing an investment organization. Those require different skill sets. and very different levels of involvement. And so it would require that the network consolidate those, and that might make it more difficult to assign appropriate people to those tasks. There's also some differences in the needs of the two entities. In the case of Dash Core Group, one of the things that, one of the advantages of our structure is that we're owned by a trust in New Zealand. And New Zealand is well respected. It certainly doesn't introduce any hurdles for us in terms of the interactions that we have with, say, banks or other financial institutions. In the case of the DIF, we had to set up a structure in which there is no owner and there is no member. And that has some advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is that it ensures that, that there is no ultimate beneficiary outside of the network itself. It has proven difficult for the DIF to obtain financial accounts. They thankfully have announced that they managed to obtain their first two. And so I think that they're hopefully off and running at this point. And so, I think that if the DIF were to acquire all of the shares of Dash Core Group, which is not a profit-making entity, that's certainly possible, but it would now introduce those challenges to Dash Core Group. We would have all of those same issues that the DIF has faced in acquiring financial or conducting financial transactions. And it's not possible to go the other way. The DIF can't be sold. That's one of the advantages to the structure that we chose, is there's no way for the supervisors to divest itself, if you will. And therefore it can't move to the trust. And so there's limitations on what could even feasibly be done. If we were to do them, I think there'd be limited benefits and there would be some serious drawbacks. So it's not clear cut to me that would be a wise move, but hopefully that helps paint some of the complexities of that picture and why we chose different structures for the two entities. Like I said, I don't think that there is a great deal of savings associated with moving one to the other, because the tasks involved are very different. And therefore, whether we moved the Dash Core Group under ownership of the DIF or attempted to do vice versa, if it were even possible, the fees that the service providers would charge would simply go up. And so I don't think that this would really generate a lot of legal expense savings. Hopefully that clarifies the question.
I think so. Thanks, Brian. The next one. Past, DCG used to ask for separate funding for each major department. I believe when they stopped doing that, they said if the DCG proposal got a certain percentage of downvotes, they would go back to separate funding. Is this still the case? What was the percentage number?
Yes, I will get this one. This is right. In the early days, we used to do different proposals for different activities. We decided to do that because all of them were passing with very high net positive votes. So it felt like a waste of time and funds. But we committed to break down again if the compensation proposal were at any time to get more than 10% of no votes, 10% of the total votes in the proposal, even passing very highly, we would do that. That happened in August 2018, I believe. And then in September, we broke up the proposals in three. Three of them passed. And what we said then is that once the trust was set up and the protectors were in place, we would stop doing this because now the network has a much granular and direct way to go into the details of the different functions in DCG. and try to intervene in those. So when the trust was set up in early 2019, since then we are having regular meetings with the trust protectors, and if the network wanted to do anything regarding one of the functions or several of them, that would be the path. And regarding this, I want to remind everyone that tomorrow we have the trust protector elections starting. So please vote, because precisely because of this and other things, it's very important to get a good set of protectors selected. So as I said, it starts tomorrow. I think it ends at the end of the month. It's a sort of thing. So please be aware and please vote.
Thank you, Fernando. I second that. Please support the network and vote for the new protectors. And the last question from the Q&A list on the slide. DCG used to list how many full-time versus part-time employees it had. Can we get an update on that?
I'll field that one. See, that's the second consecutive question from Mastermind. It's a good question. So overall, we have 34 contributors to the project, including 2 volunteers who are currently working for free. So they draw no salary. And out of the 32 paid contributors, 25 are full-time and 7 work on a part-time basis. Part-time we define as anyone working less than 33 hours a week. What I'll do is going forward, I'll continue to provide that breakout in the compensation proposals. I think that's actually valuable information for the network to have. So thanks for the question, Mastermind. Note taken. I will start including those statistics in the next compensation proposals that are posted to the network.
Thank you, Glenn. As I mentioned, we have had 2 questions from the chat. However, the first one was already addressed by Ryan. It was about tokenomics introduced by Ryan before. So the second question is, would DCG use a similar hedging strategy as what DIF and Demelza are planning to do?
So I'll take that one as well. I'm actually a fan of what the DIF is doing and Demelza in terms of how they're investing, holding Dash and investing into gold. Unfortunately, that doesn't work for Dash Core Group, and it makes sense when you look at kind of the purpose of each entity. For the DIF, it's surrounded around investing. For Dash Core Group, for us, it's really about using Dash, the funding from the network that we get in terms of Dash, using it for operational expenses, right? So we don't want to, we don't want to, I'm not going to say it, but gamble with the money we get from the network in a sense. All our liabilities are in US dollars. So the most prudent thing is to kind of take that Dash and sell it off into USD and hold a USD cushion. So, if we held significant amounts of Dash and the value of Dash were to go down, that would really affect both our income statement and our balance sheet at the same time. And that's not kind of a prudent thing to do. So because we want to limit our risk, we need to hedge out into USD all the funding we get from the network.
Thanks, Glenn. And with that, I believe we can conclude the Q&A session. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Ryan, Bob, and Fernando for participating the session, for providing an information to our community members. Ernesto, Michael, Dana, thanks for supporting the rest of the team in preparations. Of course, big kudos to our developers and the entire DCG team for the outstanding progress we have made during Q1 this year. And of course, thank you very much for the community members for joining the call. I hope you enjoyed it, and for the support you are providing to us and to the Dash network. Thanks a lot. Bye.